Top of the Sportsmax Zone for this Friday. Lots of football to come in the coming month. And with this story as well, on Thursday's show, we discussed the Privy Council's ruling against Trinidad and Tobago's former FIFA Vice President, Austin Jack Warner, and his extradition appeal, a ruling that paves the way for the extradition proceedings to continue. Warner, who for 2 decades, 1990 to 2011, was head of CONCACAF, that's the governing body for football in North America, Central America and the Caribbean, had challenged the extradition procedure following the US request in July 2015 for him to face charges of wire fraud, racketeering and money laundering. Let's give a reminder now of Warner's statement released on Thursday in response to this week's Privy Council ruling. Here's what Warner said. Since receiving the decision of the Privy Council, I have conferred with my lawyers and do wish to state that FIFA is an independent association, not affiliated to any government or country. At all times, it sought, in the interest of football, to offer opportunities to the widest cross-section of international community to host the World Cup. Particular attention was paid to the developing countries who have been denied economic opportunity, partly because for long periods they were under colonial domination. Now, against that background, FIFA gave preference to South Africa, Russia, Qatar to host the World Cup finals. Naturally, the United States of America and the United Kingdom, who had previously hosted the World Cup, were not selected despite sustained lobbying. They were therefore not pleased and thereafter began a campaign against FIFA, which resulted in the arrest and prosecution of several executive members of FIFA who had assembled for a meeting in Zurich. I note that several European countries, Warner said, including France and Switzerland, several Latin American countries, including Brazil, and several African and Middle Eastern countries have refused to extradite citizens. Trinidad and Tobago is therefore an outlier. Warner says, I have no banking account nor property in the United States. I have not transacted any business there. It is unfathomable how a New York district attorney could commence a prosecution against me based solely on the fact that monies payable to me passed through the American banking system. Furthermore, it is incredulous that allegations of misconduct arising out of a FIFA meeting held in Trinidad could be prosecuted in the United States, whereas in Trinidad itself, it does not constitute criminal activity. I continue to have confidence in my team led by Fayed Hussain, senior counsel, and I have advised them to continue to press my case on the 3 remaining stages of these proceedings. I have lived in this country for nearly 80 years, and I am confident that I will continue to receive the love, affection and respect that people from all walks of life have always extended to me. I'm certain I will prevail in the end. For the time being, this is all I'm prepared to say in this matter. But here to explain the legal side of this event, Attorney at Law Sean Tikasing. Sean, welcome to the Sportsmax Zone. A lot has happened this week, including the announcement of the Privy Council ruling denying Jack Warner's appeal and a subsequent response from Jack Warner on that. Can we start by getting an outline from you as to what the Privy Council ruling actually meant up to the point, or means at this stage of the issue?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Lance, on the program. And I would love to explain that. First of all, to understand the Privy Council's ruling, it is important to understand that Mr. Warner had taken a preliminary point in the extradition proceedings that stayed the proceedings at the Magistrates' Court, so that the High Court and then Court of Appeal and eventually Privy Council had to rule on whether or not there was authority to proceed and whether or not the Attorney General, acting under the powers of the Extradition Act, had power to do so. And in short, what it means is that the Privy Council has ruled that the appeal by Mr. Warner challenging the orders made by the Attorney General and the power of the Extradition Act, they are within its powers. So now the magistrate can continue to hear and take evidence in this matter to determine whether Mr. Warner should be extradited. So really and truly, the Privy Council decision just allows the magistrate now to continue with the proceedings that were filed all the way back in 2015.
Yeah, well, Austin Jack Warner, Sean, remains steadfast in his position. On a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the highest, how predictable was it from a legal perspective that the Privy Council would have ruled the way they did?
Well, it's not just the Privy Council. It's the High Court ruling that the Attorney General and the proceedings were fair. It's also the Court of Appeal of Trinidad and Tobago ruling that the proceedings were fair. And it's also the Privy Council agreeing with all the courts. So really and truly, Mr. Warner was entitled to make that challenge because the law allows for it. But it's clear now, based on the ruling, that it must go forward. Now, Mr. Warner may have been the first person to make that challenge to the act, but it doesn't mean that it may not have affected someone before, or it may not have affected someone in the future. Mr. Warner chose to make the challenge, and now the law is clear that the act and the AG is empowered by the act once there is a treaty, and in this case it's a foreign state, the United States. The order was made by the Attorney General back in 2000 to make the United States one of those places where Trinidad persons can be extradited from Trinidad to the United States. So he was entitled to do so, which he did, and the law is clear now that the act is clear and it has the force in it so that persons can be extradited.
Right, and Sean, help us to understand now Mr. Warner's statement, because he says that, this can't be so because I have no U.S. account, no U.S. property, and, basically you can't prosecute me because I've had monies coming through the U.S. That aspect of the statement.
So Mr. Warner is and I can't say for certain, I don't represent him.
Yeah.
But generally what he's trying to say or basically say to the general public and the world at large is that how can you prosecute me for something that they say is a crime in Trinidad and Tobago? Or you're saying that I allegedly did a crime in Trinidad and Tobago. So really and truly, if it was a crime that I did in Trinidad and Tobago, allegedly, then it's really Trinidad and Tobago that needs to take action against me. So it's clear that he is signaling, of course, with good advice, that there are a number of other avenues he's going to challenge in the future, and saying that when the evidence is eventually led before the magistrate has to determine whether or not there is evidence to justify a committal and a warrant for him to be extradited. So it all now turns on the evidence that is going to be led in the court. Which has not happened as yet because the proceedings were stayed so that Mr. Warner could judicially review the decision of the AG, which has now been cleared.
Yeah, and of course, on yesterday's show, George and myself, we tried to interpret the statement. We're no lawyers, so of course we would have been looking at it from a different point of view. Do you think, based on what you've heard from both sides, does Mr. Warner, somebody who has been, at the forefront of Trinidad and Tobago, of course, he has done good for football, as well as, many people will outline the bad that he would have done. Does he have a way out?
That's a difficult question, Ms. Ramarak. The law provides for many avenues for one to avoid extradition. One of them, as was stated by Mr. Warner, is that the alleged crime took place in a jurisdiction outside of the country trying to extradite. There are other avenues open to Mr. Warner. If the evidence in itself is weak or tenuous, the magistrate is empowered under Section 12 of the Act to dismiss the extradition proceedings. So yes, there is the possibility that there is a dismissal. Of course, if there's a dismissal, there can be appeal of that decision within a specified period of time. And even if he is committed, if the magistrate finds that there is enough evidence to extradite him, then at that stage, Mr. Warner can also challenge it. So there are a number of procedural hurdles that needs to be crossed before this extradition, if at all it happens, takes place. What is also important is that Mr. Warner is innocent until proven guilty. So Mr. Warner has always professed his innocence, and he's entitled to do so. And the laws of Trinidad and Tobago, and I'm sure of the United States, presumes innocence on everyone until proven guilty. So Mr. Warner has every chance and every opportunity available to him, and his counsel will ensure that he gets every opportunity to make representations at the appropriate stage for the result that he wants, which is either, if it is to avoid the extradition because lack of evidence, or if down the road, if in fact he's extradited, to show that he's innocent.
Sean, you referenced a couple of times just now the other stages that he has, in the way of putting hurdles in the way of this extradition. He himself pointed to 3 remaining stages of these proceedings. Can you give us a timeline as to how long this may be protracted? In other words, if he is to be extradited, what would be the soonest possible time that could happen?
Well, definitely the soonest possible time. That would be hard to see. The judiciary in our country tries very hard to deal with matters in a just and fair and expedient manner. However, there are backlogs in our system, which result in delays and also results.
Yeah, I think we
in time being spent. Next year, the extradition proceedings are completed before the magistrate, or it may be 2 years from now. But even if that is completed, there is still the options available to Mr. Warner to challenge those decisions at the different levels of our judicial system. And that would be the Court of Appeal, the High Court, Court of Appeal, and then Privy Council. So it may very well take some time.
Yeah.
It took 5 years before the Privy Council made this ruling, and I would like to point out that very close to the next FIFA World Cup, so a very opportune time to make that ruling. And so it may take 5 years. I can't say for certain.
Yes.
Definitely, definitely Mr. Warner is entitled to all his challenges, because every citizen is determined equal before the law.
Yeah.
Sean Tika Singh, attorney at law in Trinidad and Tobago, thanks for talking to us to put some more flesh onto this story. And obviously we'll be monitoring what happens from here on. And it does sound, as you just articulated, that this could be protracted for several years to come. Let's wait and see what happens. Yeah, Sean Tika Singh there. So Mariah, you heard it from Sean. There's no specific timeline that he could put on it, but knowing the judicial system in TNT and the backlog and so on, and the right that Austin Jack Warner has to stand up for his position, there is every chance that this could extend for several years.
Yeah, but I'm just looking forward to see how long it takes, Lance, because issues like this, situations like this, they don't really look good just looming in the air. This is a case that we've been talking about since, I was a little girl. I'm here sitting on the Sportsmax Zone now discussing it, and, it feels as if it's like forever. And sometimes, looking on as the public, you want some sort of closure. You want to know what happens. So we wait again.
Yeah, well, one thing we can say, Austin Jack Warner is a very strong and determined individual. We saw it while he was presiding over the CFU, CONCACAF, and vice president of FIFA. He's 79 years old at the moment and still standing firm. We go to break. Still a lot more football to come on the Sportsmax Zone.